Hello and welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. To all the Canadian soccer fans out there, Happy New Year's to everybody for 2024 season. And I hope everyone had a great holiday in 2023. But now we're starting fresh in 2024. And we have a guest on our show who is now starting fresh with Canadian Soccer Daily. Also from the he was from the 13th Man Sports and for 49 Sportsnet, and now he's starting fresh with Canadian Soccer Daily. His name is Thomas Hewitt. Nice to having you.
Thanks for having me on again, Jacob. And a
And
happy new year to you too.
yeah, it's to all the Canadian soccer fans out there with a new year to all. And we are talking about this transfer market for Canadian soccer. Also, some news that just kind of been a question mark what the commissioner from the Canadian Premier League of what the future would be like for the Canadian Premier League, and also what our 2024 predictions would be like on the road. So the transfer market has been big for this year in Canada. And just for example, Tajon Buchanan actually going to Inter Milan. That was one of the biggest ones for Canada to go. And just like for example, for big names like for example, Alfonso Davis going to Bayern Munich, I know lots of people are always say Alfonso Davis is still eyeing for Real Madrid. That's still one of his goals. So, what was your reaction on Buchanan actually going to Inter Milan?
Well, I think it is huge for so many reasons. I think getting more Canadians in these top European clubs is just so big for getting our talent into these bigger teams in Europe, seeing what Canada really has to offer. And for Inter, this is a player that they've wanted since the Qatar World Cup. This is someone who's been on their wish list, who they've courted many times, I'm sure. And for me, having if a Canadian is the number one on the transfer list of a club like Inter Milan, that really does mean so much to the growth of the game in this country. It's going to expose a lot of people to uh, to Canadian soccer, because if you look at what some the Serie A just posted like an illustration where there's I think a drawing of him when he was with Sigma FC. So it's just at the top it seems big, but the effects that transfers like this will have on the grassroots side of the game too, it's huge, and it tells Canadian kids that like they can dream of playing for Inter Milan, they can dream of playing for Bayern Munich, and this is definitely the biggest Canadian transfer since Alphonso Davies went to Bayern Munich. So it's so big in so many ways, and I'm really happy for Tajon.
And and also, for example, Portland has signed a defender that played for Inter Miami who won the League's Cup. It's Miller.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's
it's
also a big one.
definitely it's a steal really for Portland, because Inter Miami, I assume, I don't know what they were really thinking, because Kamal Miller is one of the best defenders in MLS. I don't think that's up for too much debate really. So to see him be in an environment, maybe in Miami, they really weren't, treating him as they should, because they'll probably be bringing in some sort of A-list center back over the winter, if we know anything about that club. So Portland, they're going to probably pair him with another Canadian, Zach McGraw. So that's going to be an interesting combo to look out for. As they'll have experience together, I'm sure Zach McGraw can benefit a lot from that. Um, for Kamal Miller, you're definitely on a team that's not on the same level as Inter Miami, but I'm sure that he will be quickly emerge as one of their top players in the rotation.
Yeah, and also when you think about Inter Miami, also they're just been announced from a few and like a months ago that Luis Suarez is going to be with Inter Miami, And also they had big name players like even a fullback, which was also a big name that played for Lionel Messi. And you have a big names coming in for Inter Miami, and this team might be a big powerhouse for the upcoming season for Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I think it's hard to see this team not going deep in MLS or winning Leagues Cup again. And they also have the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They have a bye into the round of 16. Um, and it really seems like this team is about to cause some chaos in the North American soccer landscape just because it is unprecedented what they're doing. You look at even LA Galaxy of the early 2010s and late 2000s with Beckham and all the stars that they brought in, but that is still somehow not even close to what Miami's doing. You got obviously Messi, Suarez, and there's Alba and Busquets, and you look at when Alba, Busquets, and Messi came in last year, how that elevated all these other players, your Robert Taylors, your Benjamin Kramaskis, and they're only going to become better. And as far as I know, Miami doesn't even have that bad of an academy system either. So it seems as though they kind of have a monopoly on all the talent coming into MLS right now. Uh, is that good for the league? Maybe around the world, yes. In terms of actually inside the league, maybe not. It would be good if all that talent was a bit more spread out, but still, this is a super team that we've never seen before in North America.
Yeah,
And it is exciting. It will be exciting.
yeah. Even it's going to be really exciting for Major League Soccer versus Liga MX, of course, in the Concacaf Champions Cup, and not just that, even for Canadian Premier League teams in the also versing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup would be, for example, Orlando versus Calgary, but they are going to be playing in Vancouver Islands. That's one of the biggest deal for playing at home.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a bummer for Calgary out there, but still, it's on Canadian soil. That's a good sign for that. And you think about the Canadian Premier League right now, all the teams now trying to sign players, but starting with Atletico Ottawa, there's a lot of changes coming in. There's been a lot of changes in the transfer, but right now Atletico Ottawa just signed basically a former Atletico Ottawa player, then played for Valor FC, and comes back to Ottawa. It's it's Matt Rename.
Yes. Mateo Gibran is one of probably one of the two biggest Canadian Premier League free agents in this offseason, alongside Manuel Aparicio, who there's obviously rumors swirling about his destination. But Debrian, uh, this is the guy that Ottawa has wanted for so long. For the last couple of years now, you see the fans online all telling him how great it is if he came home, and he has. And although it'd be interesting to know if he had any offers abroad, and if those were, because based on him signing with Atletico Ottawa, I have to imagine that there was no kind of big offer, big chance, either in MLS or abroad, that he thought was valuable enough. And even if he did get one of those, I like that he's kind of betting on himself and staying in the Canadian Premier League. He's a huge talent, and for the CPL to retain him, that's big. He is definitely one of the faces of the league now after winning U21 Player of the Year. He's just, I mean, some of the goals that he scores, he's got, I think, back-to-back years now where he scored one of the best goals of the year. He's just a human highlight reel on offense and defense. And I think for Ottawa, this is a player that can really enhance what they can do on the field. They've been doing one of their parts of their kind of collapse in the latter parts of last year was they couldn't really, they were stifled a bit attacking from different channels, and they could really only go through the middle with Ollie Bassett. But with Mateo Debrian, you're someone on the left wing that brings so much more to the team, and I think they're going to be really dangerous next year. It's a bit strange to say that after only one signing, but I'm sure that Fernando Lopez has more planned for this offseason.
Yeah, and also that they re-signed Maxime Tissot. That's also something that is a key player for Atletico Ottawa. And right now, what they've actually lost is one of the big player, Johnny Dos Santos, who's now playing. He's going to enter Kashi for a second division league in India.
Yeah, I Dos Santos I think was an interesting for them last year. I wouldn't say that he was as good as he was at Pacific. I think Ottawa, I mean, as a whole, the front line, the offense did struggle a bit last year. You can't really fault DeSantos, but he definitely wasn't up to how he played at Pacific, which was a very good winger, and that's what Ottawa brought him in for. And maybe he came up a little short. So all in all, that probably not only does it open up more room for DPN on the left side, but it does definitely mean that Ottawa has some more coming.
Yeah, and also Jean-Ariel Assi is also free agent. For also, there's also a lot of players still, like for example Sean Melvin. That's also two players that are kind of interesting to find to sign for the Canadian Premier League.
And yeah, and Assi, I believe, is going back because I believe he was a loan player. He was on loan at Cavalry in 2022. I think he's going back to Montreal now after the year he had, where he back-to-back years in the CPL, where he was pretty impressive. I've got to imagine that Montreal takes a much longer look at him for their MLS roster.
Yeah, and I wonder where Sean Melvin would actually go to, but it matter where he might go is maybe in the West area for the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah, maybe.
Or he might go to the USL.
Potentially. He's a good backup goalkeeper in the CPL. He is someone that can step in and will deliver pretty good performances week in, week out. I'm a bit surprised, actually. I was a bit surprised to see that Ottawa let him go, because I think the tandem of Egham and him was pretty good, but I'm sure maybe it has something to do with them wanting to shake it up a little bit. There are a few teams that could use the services. I think you look at a Vancouver FC, perhaps. They let go of their backup goalkeeper. I forget what his name is, but they let go of him. Yeah, Zielinski, thank you. They let go of him, and perhaps maybe Melvin might fit in there behind Callum Irving. I'm sure that he will find a job, because he is a pretty valuable player.
Yeah, and I hope that there's going to be a lot of signings for Atletico Ottawa that might be big players for Atletico. They've been true for some of the players, but Calvary FC is a great roster for this upcoming season. I do like how the Calvary FC did. They've just signed. I know they signed Michael Harms that played for Calgary Foothills, but they signed Diego Gutierrez, which is a steal from Valor FC, and also Lenton Brooks from Melbourne Victory. That's also something that is really something is a good steal from Calgary FC, from good two signings.
100%. It is Cavalry. Them having the Champions Cup, that's immediately a big selling point for players coming to Cavalry. And Gutierrez, I'm sure, just saw that, and knowing the player that he is, which I believe is one of the most underrated midfielders in the CPL, that probably was the deciding factor for him, and he stays out west. This is a huge signing for them. Their midfield, very good, but having another person that can attack in there. They usually play in the 4-2-3-1 with Daly and Trafford as defensive midfielders. I think being able to play maybe a 4-3-3 and you have Gutierrez in the middle, because he can play on both sides. He's obviously a set piece master too. He can do so many things, and I think this really does benefit Cavalry to have that extra person, especially because knowing that they're going to be playing some more games and more big games, I think makes it even more of a crucial signing. So this was huge for them getting Gutierrez.
Yeah, it's going to be it's what we're seeing now from Calgary FC. It might be actually a good roster for this upcoming season, and it's something that we need to see in the season for the upcoming season. And now Forge has not signed anything, but they still have a good roster. They've won the playoffs for the Canadian Premier League, and right now, who they're versing in the. I know that lots of people already heard what happened in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Who they're versing is Chivas. It's a big signing and something. He's played in Real Madrid. He played in Manchester United. It's a
Yeah,
big signing. It's a real big signing that they're going to be versing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's something that Forge FC fans maybe should have a great watch in this match.
yeah. Chicharito immediately gets Chivas, to level up a bit. Um, Then there's also the rumors of them signing Cade Cowell, who's kind of this young up and coming superstar from the San Jose Earthquakes. So if they get both of those players, this is a much more difficult task for Forge. I think at first glance, before they made that signing, you might look at this and think, it's doable, or at least it can be very close. But with Chivas bringing in Chicharito and potentially Cade Cowell, Forge is going to need a lot. They're going to need all their guys to be ready to go. A bit of a worrying thing though is that now they've lost Wu and Spacias, and we don't know necessarily where he's going to go. Most likely MLS, and Manuel Vitz reported that it's Nashville SC that is in hot pursuit of him and potentially his choice too. So there's Forge is going to need, everyone has to be healthy. They're going to need to bring in a couple new signings, I'm sure. Again, with the allure of the Champions Cup, it shouldn't be too difficult, but still, you would hope that if they want to really compete and make a mark in this competition, like they did with CONCACAF League, that they're going to have to bring in a couple more guys because, Chicharito was huge. But him coming to Hamilton, again, big for the game. It's just another way to market this, really, which is big.
And also they've also made a transfer for Mandracar James. He goes to Aluhense, who's basically has the advantage for winning. And this is a team that won the Central America Cup that gets the advantage in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Kind of something that questions on this transfer market for Forge FC fans.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange transfer, and it kind of makes you wonder about where Bobby Smirniotis is with the club. When Magikarp James joined, he said about how, playing under Bobby is something that, he knew that he wanted to do. He played for Sigma FC, and that's obviously Forge's training ground pretty much. Their best top developer. So him leaving, it's obviously, it doesn't confirm anything. It would just be it's just speculation, obviously, but thinking of maybe where James leaving, he came in for Smirniotis. Is he also leaving because maybe Smirniotis is on the way out too? It'd be a bit strange ahead of the Champions Cup, but you never know, right? But it's a big loss for them because he was quite good last year.
Yeah, and also, and it's always the question of Forge FC in their transfer market of who they assign for him. Like, for example, there's a lot of players could basically back up him for Forge FC. For example, Daniel Henry, that's also one that he's a free agent for and he played for Halifax Wanderers. And you have, and I hope that a lot of players that they will try to find would actually be a big star for HFC. But right now, they're on the clock for one more month to basically sooner or later play for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and the time is on right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you say, 1 month, and that's a big factor with this offseason. Obviously, I believe they'll still be able to sign people right up until the CPL season, just because they're a CPL club. But yeah, the clock is ticking, as you say.
Yeah, in mentioning Halifax Wanderers that Daniel Henry played, um, as noticed, they've had kicked out a lot of players. Ryan James, for example, is one of them. Muhammad Omar just was a free agent, and he goes to San Antonio FC. And this and Theo Colomb is no longer. There's a lot of players that have left, like for example, Christian Campagna, and this team did really well in the previous season. And look, I think Halifax Wanderers is going to sooner or later try to find good players and see how it goes. And it has to be a roster that basically has to fit in. I think that's what they have right now. They have a good manager, coach, you would say, and it is really well knows how to sign good players and get along. They've made it to the playoffs. They came third, and as noticed, I feel like the fans always know that they have the best managing for it. So they had Jordan Pazura that played for TFC. That was great loaning for Halifax Wanderers, and this is something right now they have to find who's on the clock, like who's on the free agency, who's a good signing, and it is going to be something for Halifax to see who they sign.
Yeah, they said that they wouldn't be signing or they wouldn't be announcing any signings until January 31st. So, we can all remember that date and keep it in mind for when judging Halifax's offseason. There were quite a few names that left that went out the door. I think it was mostly free agents, including Daniel Henry, which really, considering how much he actually played for them, isn't that big of a loss. To be perfectly honest, I
Yeah,
think that
he really didn't play that much as a starter, and he was usually played in the bench. It is kind of a big low for Daniel Henry. I would assume that he played for Halifax Wanderers, and I hope there is going to be a team that will make him surprisingly thrive, and hoping it comes well.
Yeah, I do hope so. I definitely. Yeah, with Halifax, there's options on the table. They still have guys like Nimick and Caligari under contract, which is big. I still think that they need another striker because I feel that Thiago Coimbra is very good, and obviously for U21 minutes they're going to need him because, quite frankly, they don't really have the depth of U21 players that other clubs have. But I think there are definitely still some needs if they want to replicate that third place finish and even go a step further. There's going to have to be big signings. There's a rumor of Aparicio as Joshua Healy from Wanderers Notes as reported. So that potentially is on the table. If that is indeed true, that immediately is a huge shakeup in the CPL. I definitely think that Halifax, there's Geyser definitely does have some pull. I think within Ontario too, especially with his connections to Vaughan, giving those players opportunities. You look at a Massimo Ferrin who had 8 goals and I think 4 assists last season. So it's definitely an off season that is still developing because I'm sure that there's more that Derek Martin has to offer. Um, just depends on who it's going to be.
Well, at least they're a team that does really well in developing players, and they made it to the playoffs. They had,
Yeah,
and also, if mentioned on the second season on the Island Games, they were finalists. That's also something, but that was under Stephen Hart also. So that's this Halifax Wanderers is actually, in my opinion, a good team for developing also
yeah,
in this Canadian
definitely,
Premier League. Uh,
definitely.
yeah, Pacific FC also has also been kind of a big surprise of the season. They've not been signing any players, and right now it is going to be a long season of who they're going to announce for their roster, and it's closed. Yeah, Pacific. And what was the react? Like, what's your reaction right now of Pacific FC?
Pacific, um, I definitely say again, as as you said, they have not really done anything. Last season, they, they brought in a lot of names, and Pacific always has a strange season because they always do this thing where they are the absolute best in the first half, then
And it's
tail
not
off.
just that. It's not just that about Pacific FC. There's been sources that Aparicio might not be part of the team.
Yeah, Aparicio. Then you've also got to consider another free agent that was so big for them last year, or not a free agent, but other clubs are going to want to sign him or
Yeah, Valor
get a
is
transfer him for him
interested.
is Amon Salouf.
Valor FC is interested. That I've heard.
Yeah, then there's they're going to need to bring in it. The roster definitely needs some work, and you need to find a way for Pacific. Their goal has to be how can we create a team that is as competitive in the first half of the season, and that remains going into the second half because that's been their big issue. That was what dropped them from first to fourth in last season, which was a notable drop off and one that Pacific is it's kind of starting to become a tradition on Vancouver Island. So they need a roster that's good for the whole season. They need to bring in probably a few more veterans, but that club's mission, and James Merriman has said that their top priority is still develop youngsters, and we'll just see how that might factor into their signings because I'm sure there will be some U21s, but there will have to be experienced guys, very talented guys, if you are to replace someone like Aparicio or Amon Salouf.
Also, having this, even when talking about Pacific FC having struggles, it's also Valor FC having struggles to win games, and they've not done well, but they've been doing well for signing players.
Yeah, I mean, arguably that's a bit outweighed by the players that they haven't signed, your Gutierrez's and your DeBriennes, but bringing back Dante Campbell was pretty big. That's good deal for them. You've got Taz Mordekaitis, who really fills in a role that no one had last year, which was a good, durable center back. Then you've got
Jordan Faria.
Jordan Faria, who has CPL experience. That's in TFC2 experience past year. He scored a few goals. That's more of a bit more of a question mark than a guy like Mordekaitis, who's CPL proven. Then there's Sean Hundal, who obviously has a relationship with Dos Santos, played with Valor during the Island Games, is a good striker if he's actually played. So I think that they're doing better than some people might think, but at the same time, it's going to take a lot to replace your DeBriennes and Gutierrez's.
And of the tactics of their offense also is also a thing that if they could use these players, it's just like, for example, William Akio, also that they've transferred. He played for a little while in Europe, and then later Calvary FC takes him.
Yeah, one of Valor's, just big problems is their old players, or players that used to play for them, I should say. They go on and become big names in at other CPL clubs. Ali Musi, Marco Bustos is now in Europe. Both played for Valor at one point. So it just, yeah, and Akio, as you say. So it is just a problem with retaining players for them, because if they could, I think they'd be a lot more competitive.
Yeah, and as mentioned, for the Vancouver FC, even Vancouver FC that has not actually signed any players, and who they basically get out is, as noticed, Sean Handel, who's now with Valor FC, as noticed, we've mentioned Nathiel St. Louis, who played for York United, and Jeremy Zielinski, who was the backup goalie. He only played one match because Callum Irving, who injured himself during the pregame, so not really that much of players that got out from Vancouver FC, but it will be questions of how how Vancouver FC will try to basically manage of signing players for the season. Will it be a big surprise of Vancouver FC fans for how it will be for their upcoming season? I really think that if there is a big player that we see for Vancouver FC, what they sign, I think Vancouver FC might have a chance for being maybe top five.
I would definitely agree with that. I think last season we saw Vancouver get really good right at the end. And if you just took the second half of the season, if those final 14 games were the entire season, I believe Vancouver would have made the playoffs and relatively comfortably. There's a lot of loan deals that came in for them in mid-season, but I think what Ashton Goppy is building is very promising. I think you look at Vancouver as a market is a very appealing market to play in. There's a lot going for it. So them being silent for now, I don't think is too much of a problem, given that they do have, a lot of good players under contract. I believe Cal Irving and Caden Chung are both under contract there. So that's two crucial players that are locked up for next season. Um, but they were able to get a guy like, Renan Garcia, who's experienced basically everywhere. Then they also signed in midseason an intriguing younger guy, Vasco Fry, who I think could be quite good, and Ivan Mejia too. Didn't play much, but he's pretty good too. So Vancouver, given who they've been able to persuade to come in the past, a guy like Alejandro Diaz, I wouldn't be too worried. I think something's coming for them.
Yeah, and also Vancouver FC does have a good roster that is under the 20 age. For example,
Yes. Yeah.
Tahid, also James Cameron, and Bakar also.
Hmm.
But um, as noticed, you Vancouver FC, I know Vancouver FC has been outscored. They had a terrible season with Atletico Ottawa. I hope that Vancouver FC does not don't have a big blowout in their matches ever again. But
I don't think they will. I
no,
think
I don't hope so. But we know Atletico Ottawa did have a blowout once from Valor FC. That was something um, that is disappointing for Atletico Ottawa fans. But there is even, for example, York United 4-0 was one of those. But I think that where we're seeing in Canadian Premier League, when we see big goals and a big blowout, it is something. It is something. But I hope that upcoming season we'll see more goals happening with big signings. So so Vancouver FC, hoping for maybe late in the late month they will make an announcement of a signing that will see what is attracts them of Vancouver FC has a good signing. Maybe they might make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if they did emerge as a good CPL team. Maybe in the next season, maybe sneak a win in the Canadian Championship or something like that, and just kind of continue to work their way up
Yeah,
and build on them. They're
and
still an expansion club, right? Still a very young club, so still learning.
just like Atletico Ottawa used to be, and
Mm-hmm.
York United, the final one, um, something that has been big from it's got a lot of attraction right now, and it's shocking lots of fans what is happening in York United. They've just signed uh, Denis Saladinovic, who played in Spain. And also Juan Cordova, Chilean
Yes.
Chilean national player, and also Canadian national player who had experience from the national team. Um, just came back from the first division league in Chile, and now some surprises that fans are really shocked that maybe York United will make it to the playoffs, maybe improve.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was going to be, it was always going to be an interesting offseason because York has the new owners. They're still probably working on, their list of CPL contacts. And the first two signings are not CPL guys. They have experience for Solanovic in Europe and for Cordova in South America. Very vast experience and very valuable experience. So I think we might see a lot more of kind of players that aren't necessarily CPL seasoned come in. Cordova has Canadian citizenship, so him qualifying as a domestic player is huge just for, obviously the CPL has some weird kind of rules in terms of roster building, what you can and can't do. But I do think that it is shaping up to be more promising. I think York, although maybe not bringing back guys like your Paris G's and Jeremy Gagnon-Lapare's was disappointing. I think it could have been a lot worse. You still have Austin Ricci, who I think was huge last year. You still have a couple of U21 guys, and all in all, it is shaping up to be better than a lot of people thought it would have been. I think you're right in saying that.
Yeah, and also mention about that we're out was also even the one that maybe like Valor FC also even got Taz. Keep on forgetting how it is.
Mordekaitis.
Yeah, and Paris G is also one of them. Um, it there were also like for example even Jonathan Gratz and Michael Petrasso, Jeremy Gagan Lapare is also one of them. I think those players were actually good, but it is going to be a question of where Lapare is going to be going. But some people might say, hey, maybe he might go to Ottawa.
Maybe. With experience with the Ottawa Fury, that certainly seems like a possibility. Uh, I think he would fit in quite well in Ottawa, maybe alongside Alberto Zapater in their defensive midfield. But the thing is with Zapater is that we know why he was criticized because he wasn't getting around the pitch that much. Whereas Gagnon-Lapare does so much. So that's definitely would be a huge signing for Ottawa and something that would, he knows the city. He would fit in quite well, I think.
Yeah, I think that I know like Atletico Ottawa was getting criticism from the players were getting a lot of questions of who has a better leadership in it, who's most better of being the captain, and Nathan Mingham basically said that during his conference, during the time that they were versing York United.
Yeah, that was to be in the room for that one. That was pretty shocking. I'm that really was. He sounded off when he said that. I think he would be a good captain. Actually, I think he probably fits that role the best. But maybe a guy like Bassett who kind of leads by example and has been there for a while would also work. Either way, I would anticipate a bounce back from Ottawa.
Yeah, and like I did say about Atletico Ottawa. If you want, and I think we've mentioned about Balou Tableau was one of the biggest loss for for them. That why they've transferred him to the second division Turkey. That was something, but um, it would be if they had Balou Tabla still, and I think that Atletico Ottawa would have been more would still be better and make it to the playoffs alongside with Balou Tabla, but it does question if they're willing to sign him back for the maybe the upcoming season, or basically um, the other seasons that he's a free agency. But right now, I think if they signed him right now, it's going to be too. They wouldn't be willing to sign him of because of the money of he's that he's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Atletico Ottawa also the other teams of seeing um, how they sign and see some shockers of players who they sign, but also seeing what's next um, for the Canadian Premier League that was kind of something that is really something what the commissioner said on in his press of deciding is the East and Western Conference for the future of it, and it does really kind of um, really think that is the commissioner kind of basically changing things around, like because even for example he was at the playoff finals and basically said well what the future was. Maybe it was promotion relegation, even second division league, and now he flip flops in deciding maybe Eastern Western Conference might be the future for the Canadian Premier League. So is the commissioner kind of trustworthy for this one, or is this one the right one?
Um, yeah, I think we can trust him with this. I think as someone who worked in Major League Soccer at like near the top of Major League Soccer for one of its big growth periods, I think he knows how to run the league sustainably. I think East and West conferences make up a big part of that. The travel fees in the CPL will be like huge, just considering you've got Halifax flying to Vancouver Island and vice versa multiple times a season. And then there was that playoff game between them too. It's just something that I think is necessary for the league going forward if it becomes bigger too. Some of the traveling in the CPL really it is too much. And you can still have Eastern teams play Western teams, but just fewer times. I think it would be better. It would ease the players too.
Yeah, and also when I mentioned Eastern Western Conference of it, League One Ontario also had Eastern Western Conference in their past of systems, and now you look at there's right now so many teams. They decided to change the system. They decided promotion relegation, but it is going to be a question mark of the Canadian Premier League if they have more teams, like 22 teams in the future for the Canadian Premier League. Does that decide maybe promotion relegation system will work?
Yeah, I mean 22 would be a lot. I don't know if there's 22 markets in Canada that could support a pro sports team like that, but
Yeah, I know that
it,
Major League Soccer has more than that.
yeah. But I think I think it makes sense, but promotion relegation is should be talked about because I think the CPL really can kind of step like it would captivate a lot of people's interest is what I'm saying in North America if they became the first professional North American soccer league to implement promotion relegation and probably first North American professional sports league as a whole uh, to do that. And while I think it could work and I think it would be very cool, I personally would prefer to seeing Eastern and Western conferences before that because I just think the, just the state of soccer in Canada right now, I would be worried that owners who don't necessarily know all that much about the sport would think, okay, we're gonna play, we're paying a big expansion fee, and we don't even know if we're gonna be in the division that makes the most money because it's right now where we're at with soccer in Canada, we're still at the point where not everyone is buying into the traditional systems. And I think the traditional systems would be good, like a promotion relegation, but at the same time, we want people to buy into this league, and that's got to be the number one objective right now for the CPL. So at the moment, Eastern and Western conferences, I just think it should be put in place before
Yeah,
promotion relegation.
yeah, I agree. Basically agree. I've been thinking about this, and I did have some hard times about this. Of would promotion relegation work, or we just go for Eastern and Western Conference? But I would say if I would say this about it, like Eastern and Western Conference is not bad for the Canadian Premier League in the future, but if if ownership does really well in the league of financing their teams really well, they're all good and doing really well in their budget for it. It does, and I think that sooner or later we might see a system for promotion relegation and how it does, but I think it's going to take long for how the league does right now because the matter of fact is it's not doing well of financing right now. And everyone knows it. They lose a lot of money every single time for the first 5 years. But maybe if the Canadian Premier League does really well in the next upcoming years, we might see that do well for it. But we've seen Valor FC; they've not done. They've lost money for the first 5 years. Also, other teams lost. But we just basically have to see how it does well in the next 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think CONCACAF is going to be a big part of that. How well they do in these CONCACAF competitions. Are there going to be more spots eventually for the CPL to get into the Champions Cup? And I definitely don't see that kind of changing anytime
No,
soon. Just
no,
considering,
I don't see that. I don't see. I think three just basically works, but when I see the CONCACAF Champions Cup announcing that there's going to be spots for the Leagues Cup, I kind of said that this is going to be all about Liga MX and Major League Soccer. That's basically it.
yeah, it
And
is unfortunate that it's like that, but it will have to be because those are the money makers, right? But if the CPL continues to work its way up, then it can be in that situation.
and also, I feel like that it does basically underrate the other leagues that don't get another chance. As you and notice that you have the Central American Cup and the Caribbean,
Hmm.
and you have to win those spots to actually make it to the Concacaf Champions Cup, and even for the Central American Cup. Yeah, I do think that the system for the Concacaf Champions Cup is just not the right system at this
Yeah,
point of the year. I think that right now, the president for CONCACAF, um, right now in the future, has to reflect on this system and have have more have a better system for all the leagues to come in
I
at the.
mean, yeah, just one thing that kind of bugs me is that MLS has 6 spots, and all of Central America, like Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, that whole region has 6. So MLS has the same amount as an entire region, and that just personally that kind of is that I don't think that's right. That just kind of bugs me because there's some very good teams in Central America.
Yeah, and lots of people from uh, that are Costa Rican also don't like the system. Also, there's a lot of Central American teams that also don't like the system, and it's always going to be a prediction of how the how the CONCACAF Champions Cup is going to be like. I know lots of people are going to predict maybe Inter Miami is going to win that CONCACAF Champions Cup, but what is your prediction for 2024?
About the Champions Cup.
Or basically all the competitions. But so what do you think about CONCACAF Champions Cup? Who do you think is going to win?
I mean, I really do hate to say it, but it's so hard to overlook Inter Miami and just the talent on that team. Although, you know, there are some really great
Teams.
Mexican teams, and I think there's on the left hand side of the bracket, which doesn't have Miami. It's a bit more open, and I think we could maybe see a shock on that side of the bracket, just because it is a little bit weaker. So maybe we have a surprise team in the final. But Inter Miami, I think it has to be their year really, because they are just so unbelievably good that we just haven't ever seen before.
Yeah. And like I do see Inter Miami being in the finals, but you have Club America also to watch. You have even Chivas also, uh, a team that basically has signed good players. So as noticed, Chivas also, as noticed in 2018, beat TFC. That was one of the biggest surprises that went to PKs. Um, I do see Liga MX team actually making to the finals against Inter Miami, but it does question who's going to win that finals. But lots of people are going to say maybe Inter Miami might be the team that wins the CONCACAF Champions Cup for this upcoming this year.
Yeah, I think they'll win that, but I would still have my questions about if they're going to win MLS. I could definitely see Champions Cup, but MLS I feel is just gonna do its thing, and somehow they go out like the first round of the playoffs to a team. But
Yeah,
you know,
it would be a shocker if Inter Miami does not um, basically win the round in the
it'd be
round that
shocking
they're
if
in.
it'd be shocking if Inter Miami didn't win every single trophy available. But that's just the standard that they're setting with these signings.
Yeah, and so we could even the Canadian Premier League, um, the upcoming season. Who do you think that might actually win win the? What is your prediction for the Canadian Premier League?
Well, I mean, the thing is that we come back to the drawing board every season with this, and you naturally look at Cavalry and Forge, and I think Cavalry has a big chance. I think they're in a really good position right now. Forge not as much. They still need to do more. With just to consider, another striker. I think has to be on their wish list. Just because I feel as though maybe Jordan Hamilton and Taron Campbell aren't enough on their own. I think Pacias, they need a guy like Pacias in that rotation. So Cavalry, I feel like it could be the year where they do the double, and they were so close last year. But I feel like this year they are getting better. I think you probably look at them as the regular season champions again, just because they've proven time and time again that is where they are best. And as for the playoffs, I feel like with a couple good signings and patch up the players they lost, I think Halifax is would be a really good team in knockout football. After the experience that they had last year, I think that was crucial, a crucial learning point for them, and maybe it's their year to do something in the playoffs instead of Forge.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually give a shout out to Dan Clark on who he predicts on who's gonna how the upcoming season is gonna be like. He thinks that Vancouver Whitecaps would be the Canadian Championship um, winners and or to repeat it. Um, Also, he also thinks that Halifax Wanderers will be the regular season champs, and he thinks Forge FC would win the playoffs. That is
Yeah. Yeah.
also something that's also that he's gonna he predicts. But I would say this about this. You didn't mention about the Canadian Championship. Who would actually win this one? Who would your prediction of the Canadian Championship?
Yeah, I mean, again, it it always does look like the Whitecaps, although you know, I like to say this every year because I know eventually I'll be right, but I feel like a CPL team can break through this year because I feel like the league really has gotten so much better than last year. Um, and when I say last year, I mean 2022. I think 2023 was light years better than 2022, and 2024 will be even better than 2023. It's just that process of growth that's we're seeing right before our eyes in the CPL. Whitecaps will be a tough out, but Montreal and Toronto, looking at them, I think obviously it depends on the draw. The draw decides everything really, but Montreal and Toronto, looking at them, they're not necessarily in a position to be winning this trophy all the time like they used to.
Yeah, um, but who am I picking as my predictions at this point? Is I th- like you're having Calvary FC and Forge FC playing in the Concacaf Champions Cup, and has
Mm-hmm.
noticed that Forge FC played in the Concacaf League. Um, they've when they played in the Concacaf League, they didn't win against in the finals against Pacific FC, and it's one of the bummers that I think that we usually see teams that play in the Concacaf Champions Cup. They most likely do not perform really well during the regular season, but I would say we see uh, new teams winning champions, actually winning a champions. But I see Calvary FC and Forge actually winning a champion, but I do see York United still being in the playoffs,
Yeah,
of course,
definitely.
since of what we've seen right now. But it does question a lot how of Pacific FC. I don't see Pacific FC in the playoffs. It's my shocker of right now. I don't see them in the playoffs of in this upcoming season.
Yeah, well, I can see why you would say that. I think it's fair to say that they're weaker than years past, and I just think Aparicio is you can look in the last 2 years when Aparicio plays, they're a lot better than when he's not. So if they don't have him, obviously we don't know that they don't have him, but it just definitely kind of seems like everything's aligning for Pacific to have a down season. It's going to require a lot of James Merman and his staff.
Yeah. So I do see most likely uh, at this point, but now I do see maybe Halifax Wanderers. Maybe I might agree with this, but it does side with maybe Halifax Wanderers could be the number two team,
Maybe, yeah,
and it does see me maybe York United being third place and Athletic Ottawa being the fourth place team. And right, and sooner or later we're going to see maybe the last two teams sliding into the playoffs. Um, and it just questions who it is. Is Valor FC or Vancouver? It just questions if Valor FC makes a big signing at that point that squeeze them in, or they might be in 6 spots at this point, or maybe 7 spots. It does question if Vancouver FC does not impress of the off season of transfer market, they might come in last place in this upcoming season. But regular season wise, I think Calvary FC might do it, but it does question. I think there might be a double win. I think there might be a double win for this upcoming season. It could be Calvary FC. I think it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, once again, they have a roster that is definitely capable of it. If they can erase all their postseason demons, it would be quite the year to do it. And a guy like Gutierrez, again, I mean that is so big for them. And I think they're probably they still have another signing. I would definitely bet that they have another signing coming.
Yeah, they would just basically have to sign maybe a second goalie, and maybe players from the front. I do see a great, strong roster for Calvary FC. Most likely to repeat a regular season champ, or finally getting redemption in winning CPL Cup.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, and I just think about the Canadian Championship. I am actually shocked of the teams from League One Canada. I am really shocked about how League One Canada is. That you have CS Saint Laurent, you have Victoria Highlanders, and you also have Simcoe Valley Rovers. You have those three teams, and I think that this Canadian Championship is going to be really competitive, and we might see some upsets.
Yeah, Simcoe is actually a very good shout. Simcoe was really good in League One last year. They've got some great players. So in the Canadian Championship, I'm telling you, after seeing TSS beat Valor last year, I think Simcoe might be the next team to kind of do something like that. So I would not want to run into them, especially in the first round.
Yeah, but I just think that if Victoria Highlanders, or you would see most likely if Atletico Ottawa screws up with any League One Ontario teams, or League One Canada team, it is going to be a shocker and a low light for those teams. But as noticed, Halifax Wanderers, they were versing Vaughan Azzurri. They almost lost to them. And even, for example, York United, they almost lost to AS Laval. That's also one that we've actually witnessed of in the Canadian Championship, like in 2019. And right now, I'm seeing the Canadian Championship is showing its true heart of all these teams in the third tier league is getting more competitive.
Yeah, I think TSS winning last year, that was something that was kind of happening for a long time. That was it was a process and it took a while, but it's so much more feasible to see League One teams actually be able to make one or even two upsets after TSS was able to do it.
Yeah. So Saint Laurent and Rovers and Highlanders, like who you think what team you think that should not touch them?
Um, well, I think that in a one game situation, Simcoe County could beat most teams, and I think looking at the way that York starts seasons, because that's been their Achilles heel at the start of the season, they're pretty slow compared to the end of the year, and I think if they had to go to Barry, it would they would have to definitely you can't underestimate Simcoe.
Yeah. So not not just that, Saint Laurent is also one of them that has really improved as being a young team in
Yeah,
League One Quebec.
yeah. Saint Laurent's an interesting one. Typically, we don't see the Quebec, the League Quebec teams do as well as the BC or Ontario teams. And I mean, look at Vaughan at Surrey, who put up a pretty good fight against CF Montreal last year. Um, but it could, I could see it happen because, as you say, they do have talent. They do have a lot of talent.
Yeah. And I know, that's a question for even, I know, Victoria Highlanders. We've seen how BC actually beat Valor FC. Do you like, if Valor FC is versing Victoria Highlanders? It is a question mark that, like, this is going to be upsetting. Like, I
Is it going
think
to happen again?
if it's going to happen, yeah, that's going to be the question mark. If it's going to happen again, it's like we've seen the real shocker of what happened with TSS Rovers, but it does question Victoria Highlanders. Does it have that competition? Do they have competitiveness to actually beat a team of that caliber?
Yeah, I mean, look, if TSS was able to do it, I mean, last year they were probably maybe a bit better than Highlanders are right now, but I could 100% see that happen. Again, I definitely wouldn't wish it on Valor because that would be really painful if it starts to become a tradition where they lose to League One BC teams like every year. But Highlanders is good, and we have to remember they were League One BC regular season champs, and the reason why it wasn't the playoff champs was because it was the Vancouver Whitecaps Academy who won the playoffs. So obviously you can't have the Whitecaps Academy in the Canadian Championship with the possibility that they face the actual Whitecaps.
Yeah, and we hope we hope that how the draw comes in, and in the a few in basically, I think, in days, because last time they drawn was January of the mid of January,
Mm-hmm.
and it just questions when they're going to announce the actual draw, and that's all, and that's full time for the Red Leaf Card. I'm your host Jacob, subbing out.